How long has it been since I did a Right in the Childhood video? Oh. Maybe it's time to finally do another one, huh? For those of you just joining me for the first time, Right in the Childhood is a personal series where I take a game from my childhood and see if it still holds up today. But since I haven't done one of these since the apocalypse, this time, let's have a little fun with it. This time, let's take a look at a game that wasn't regarded well at all at the time of its original release. And I have just the game for such an occasion. Let's talk about that time they tried to reboot Frogger. Yes, Frogger. That old school arcade classic about crossing the road and trying not to turn yourself into street pizza. In 1997, Hasbro Interactive reinvigorated Konami's arcade classic for a modern audience on the original PlayStation, and it was a commercial success, selling well over 3 million copies. I played it. It was hard. Hard as hell. Personally, I couldn't beat the first handful of stages. But we're not talking about that one. There was another attempt at a reboot in 2001 for the PlayStation 2, foregoing the arcade-style gameplay of the classic altogether. It retooled the character, the themes, and the gameplay so much to the point where it was unrecognizable. If it weren't for the word Frogger being in the title, you'd assume that this was an entirely new IP, totally unconnected to the series. And you clicked on this video, so you already know I'm talking about Frogger: The Great Quest. I tried looking, but I couldn't find any development history behind it. All I know about it is that this was developed by an American studio within Konami, and that this was their only game. Oh, you sweet summer child. But it was one of the first 3D platformers released on the PS2. In fact, it actually came out almost a full month before the first Jak and Daxter. In fact, true story, I actually ended up with both games during that holiday season. What's weird is that in that time, I didn't see any reviews for this game. And I was subscribed to both PSM and EGM at the time. So 12-year-old me had no idea what he was getting himself into when he picked this one up with his Christmas money that year. Though I guess I would have found some reviews if I had gone online, but I didn't really have internet when I was 12 years old, so I just didn't know. I just thought that the screenshots looked cool and it looked like it'd be interesting, and at the time, that was enough for me. And despite apparently a multi-million-dollar TV ad campaign according to this GameSpot article, I also didn't see any commercials for this game either. Yeah, I just went into this one completely blind. But enough preamble, what exactly is this game about? Well, it's pretty simple. Frogger, now a bipedal abomination, is living in the swamp with his mentor, Lumpy the Toad, who is also a low-poly nightmare. No. Life's kind of boring in the swamp, and that's when Frogger overhears two human kids chatting about a frog who became a human. You know, the story of the Princess and the Frog. It's that. Also, yeah, I suppose humans and animal-human hybrid things exist together in this world. Anyway, after the two boys are chased off by these freakishly large mosquitoes, Frogger decides he wants in on that princess business and makes a wish on a shooting star. And yeah, if you've seen any other video on this game, or if you've played it yourself, you've more than likely heard this infamous line.
I wish I may, I wish I must find a princess before I bust.
It's then that the fairy frog mother shows up and grants him the ability to see magical objects, a magic backpack to carry them around in, and immortality?
Now you cannot die while in pursuit of Princess Hot Lips.
Yeah, this is just an in-universe explanation as to why you have infinite lives, but I really don't feel like this game really needed to spell it out for you like that. I know this game's aimed at a younger audience, but I feel like the kids playing this would pick up on that naturally just by playing it, you know? I mean, just look at Rayman 2, that game had infinite lives, and that came out a year before this one. Though I guess the argument could be made that it wasn't super common in platformers at this time. Anyway, with all of that out of the way, the game begins, and as soon as it starts, you'll notice something almost immediately. And it's the single largest problem this game has. These controls are terrible. Not only does movement feel a little bit stiff, but trying to make jumps is an exercise in frustration. Jumping from a standstill feels a bit too stiff, and there's a bit of a delay before you're airborne, but a running jump will send your ass flying, and you'll likely miss platforms altogether. Like, if you can't nail jumping in the first level of your platformer, then that doesn't exactly bode well for the rest of the game now, does it? Like, my god, I actually don't remember the controls being this bad. And not only that, you're gonna be slipping off the edges of platforms all the time. Like, I get that frogs are slippery creatures, but this is a death sentence for your video game that involves heavy amounts of traversal. There are gonna be times where it'll look like you can jump on a certain platform, like, say, one of these mushrooms here, but look closely and you'll see that the edges are actually rounded, meaning you'll slip right off of it or not grab hold of the edge or anything if you don't approach it in just the right way. Oh, and it's fantastic when you're trying to make a running jump off of a ledge and your input just gets eaten and you just plummet off the edge like a dumbass. And you can't really depend on the game's ledge grab. Yes, there is a ledge grab, because that only seems to work when it wants to. I know watching somebody else play this can't really do it justice. You really have to play it yourself to get an idea of just how messy these controls are. I bring up platforming as if you'll be doing a lot of it, but the truth is, despite there actually being some verticality to these levels, the game doesn't ask you to do a whole lot of platform jumping in most of them. There is some for sure, but not as much as you'd probably think in a game like this. A lot of these levels are just big, flat, open areas where you'll be fetching items for NPCs, or a key to open a gate, or just simply making it to the end of the stage. Despite this though, the camera loves to not cooperate with you. Not only does it tend to be zoomed in way too close to you during those moments when you are trying to make tricky jumps, but the only way to manipulate the camera at all is by pressing the L2 button to recenter it behind you, like in a Zelda game on Nintendo 64. There's no way to rotate the camera at all, and the right analog stick, which became the default camera control stick around this time, doesn't do anything when you move it. Pressing down on it makes you go into a first-person perspective, but then you have to use the left stick to actually look around. If you've played any recent platformer before this, it's gonna screw with your muscle memory really bad. I get that camera control on the right stick wasn't really a thing until, I don't know, Jak and Daxter, but they could have at least mapped the camera rotation to 2 of the shoulder buttons. Spyro on PS1 had this down and it worked just fine. The camera also loves getting stuck on walls and other objects, so don't be surprised if you go to make a jump and you can't fucking see anything because the camera got stuck on the platform you're jumping off from, sending you all the way down to the bottom of the stage, making you have to do all of that all over again. Well, at least there's no fall damage in this game. As with many other 3D platformers, there are collectibles scattered throughout the stages in the form of coins and gemstones. And I don't know how the game manages to pull this off, but these are, without a doubt, the least satisfying collectibles in any game I've ever played. What do I mean by that? Does that mean they don't do anything? Well, I mean, you can use them to buy concept art in an in-game shop between levels. This was released at a time when unlockable concept art was a thing in games you didn't have to pay for separately with real money. Apparently, early in development, you were going to be able to use those treasures to purchase skill upgrades like increased running speed and jump height. I assume before those features were scrapped. But no, what I mean is, the actual act of collecting these things itself isn't satisfying. If you're actively trying to grab these things, you'll more often than not run past them altogether. You have to go right into them to pick them up, you know, standard 3D game stuff. But because these items are very small, you'll end up passing right by them if you aren't walking head on into them. Oh, and you can just forget about trying to grab them if you're underwater. You'll often end up swimming circles around them instead of actually grabbing them. It got to a point where I just stopped trying to grab them altogether. You could honestly cut these collectibles out and nothing about the game would be lost except for the concept art, which isn't really that big of a loss. The game doesn't even give you a tally during stages to tell you how much you have in the event you actually are trying to buy stuff from the shop. And if you do manage to pick one up, they all make this sound. And that doesn't sound good stacked on top of each other now, does it? They could have tried for a more satisfying sound when you pick one up. The best games out there always give you a satisfying sound when you pick up a collectible, but this... I don't know, it doesn't really fit, you know? Oh, and speaking of sounds, another pickup in the game are these bugs that you can eat to recover your health. Okay, I want you to take a look at this footage here and tell me how you think he eats these things. Maybe some kind of cute frog tongue animation, right? Well, get a load of this. Holy shit, that's gross. He fucking crouches down like a boglum and shoves it in his mouth. That loud crunching noise is the stuff of nightmares. Holy shit, dude. Then again, this whole game is disgusting, so I guess I shouldn't be too surprised.
A stinky biggie? Do you need to go to the bathroom, little fella?
Uh-oh. Stinky.
Ooh, did I even mention that this game has combat? Because, ooh, buddy, this is, without a shred of hyperbole, the crappiest combat system ever. It is a complete joke. Pressing the square button allows Frogger to hawk loogies infinitely. Yes, you heard that right. You can kinda aim where they're going with the camera, but if you're too close to an enemy, then don't be surprised if they just end up arching completely over them. You can even do it underwater. Don't ask me how that works. You can also use it to destroy barrels that contain collectibles. Either these barrels are made out of paper, or Frogger's loogies are strong enough to destroy solid wood. Again, don't ask me how that works. So I should be able to bore right through enemies with them, but alas, I cannot. You can kinda mitigate the whole loogies arching completely over your enemies thing by holding down the R1 button. You'll lock onto the nearest enemy, and that way, you'll actually hit what you're aiming at. The only actual worthwhile item in this game are the magic stones, which give you temporary magic abilities when activated. Fire stones give your spit the power of fire. Ice stones
have to be thrown at an enemy to do damage. God help you if it misses.
And wind stones make you run faster for a short time. When you're close enough to an enemy though, pressing the square button makes Frogger perform hand-to-hand combat known as Frog Fu. And you know what? I think I'm just gonna let the gameplay speak for itself here. Yep, you just kinda mash away at the square button and he'll just kinda flop around and maybe hit the enemy you're fighting. If you're too far away from an enemy though, the animations will still play, but he won't actually hit anything. Like, this is hilarious. It's the perfect example of how this game was not tested enough. If it even was at all. It's pretty glitchy. Actually, you know what? Let me ask you this. How many testers do you think this game had? Because despite how this game plays, it actually did have testers. At least one, right? Maybe two? Well, according to the manual, the game had a whopping 15 testers. Like, how? For such a small game, it's still pretty glitchy, even with 15 damn testers working on it. Wow, I love Comic Sans, it's so great. I wish I had more time to show you all the glitches this game has. I actually remember even more from playing this as a kid that I actually didn't encounter in my 1 3/4 runs of this game for this video. One you'll experience a lot is getting damaged by enemy attacks as the enemy is dying.
Yikes!
I don't even know how that's possible. And if that wasn't enough, I even had the AI in this one boss fight glitch up on me. You ever have a boss fight just quit on you? Well, I managed to capture footage of this one. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. Oh, by the way, this character's name is Slick Willy, and he sounds like this.
You want to see the river, princess? Well, you're standing on her, silly. She's my ship. Get it?
There's also nothing stopping you from just running away from this guy to grab health pickups. There's no invisible wall or anything preventing you from escaping or anything.
Wow, you done whooped me good, boy.
But yeah, unless it was a boss fight or there was a locked door that needed a key or something, I would just run past enemies too. I was even able to despawn an enemy by off-screening it. The enemy AI overall is pretty stupid. Enemies will get stuck on objects all the time, and I even had a moment where I tricked one into falling off of a ledge.
What are you, fucking stupid?
I can't help but be a bit curious as to what this game's code looked like. The whole game's code is obviously being held together with toothpicks and scotch tape. If there's one game that makes me want to pop open the hood to see what the code looks like, it's definitely this one. It's almost fascinating how glitchy and barely functional this game is. Sure, it's not the glitchiest game ever made. There have been other games that have come along since and shown to be even glitchier at launch. But this is not a polished game in the slightest. Which is odd because this isn't some no-name publisher, it's freaking Konami. An internal studio within Konami made this. In fact, this is the same year that they released Metal Gear Solid 2 and Silent Hill 2, on the same system. I mean, I get the budget for this game may not have been as high, or the development team probably didn't have the same time or manpower that those other two games had, but you'd think with as big a publisher as Konami, they would have given more of a damn about a game featuring one of their most prominent characters. And since we're on the topic of enemies, throughout the first half or so, you'll be attacked by this mosquito gang. So, what are they called? Probably something like the Bloodsuckers, or the Buzzing Punks, or something that strikes fear in the hearts of those who hear their name. Oh. Well, that's a lame name. Even little babies aren't gonna find that threatening. Hell, this one against Metal Chicken Ray, yes, that's what it's called, and yes, it is a Metal Gear Solid 2 reference, isn't even really a boss fight. You don't even actually fight it, you just have to smash out all the lights on these lab machines to progress. But it can damage you right up until you go up this ladder to the other floors. Then it's like you don't even exist to this thing. It'll just stomp around mindlessly downstairs and not even care about what you're doing.
Okay, this is pissing me off.
Hey, whoa, 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 whoa. Did that guy just swear? The back of the box didn't mention that there'd be swearing. I don't think mild language is covered by the comic mischief descriptor. Then again, neither is fighting enemies that have axes and swords. Man, even the ESRB didn't give a shit about this game. And why does this one mosquito sound like a stereotypical impression of Arnold Schwarzenegger?
Get some! You messing with me?
Remember, brother, seek the bear's help.
Oh yeah! Come to daddy! Tongue excited!
Yeah, this game surprisingly loves making movie references. Namely Star Wars. Like, there's like 3 Star Wars references in this game.
I'm not the one you're looking for.
You're not the one I'm looking for.
These aren't the droids you're looking for.
These aren't the droids we're looking for.
You know, that's like boomer writing 101 right there. If you don't know how to write funny or witty dialogue, just reference Star Wars. That's like a free pass in media, apparently. Well, at least there were no Matrix references here. This was during that time. Though I did notice that this one evil scientist character is basically just one big reference to Dr. Evil from Austin Powers.
Ooh, my machines, they're being turned into magma.
Liquid hot magma.
Okay, maybe I'm being a little bit too hard on the game here. I mean, this was an early PS2 game. But I gotta say, the character models in this game are pretty hideous. I mean, look no further than Frogger himself, but oh my god, a lot of these are just bad. Very low poly and overall just not aesthetically pleasing in the slightest. I mean, again, look at Frogger. Look at this cutscene. He has no bottom teeth. And what, is this supposed to be his tongue? I can overlook ugly character models in these early PS2 games, but only up to a certain point, dude. And what the hell is up with these cows? They're total nightmare fuel. They only show up in 2 levels, and then you never see them again. I actually managed to grab some of the concept art for these guys, and it seemed like they were going to play a little bit more of a role in the game, but I don't know, maybe it got cut for time? I honestly can't say, but that's really what it looks like to me. It wouldn't surprise me if they had their role pared down. The whole game seems rushed and unfinished. I wouldn't be surprised if there was a lot of cut content. This skeleton dog who shows up in 1 level, for example, gets a whole profile entry in the instruction manual. It says to follow him and he'll lead you to something good. Yeah, you don't ever follow him in any level ever. He just stands there in this 1 level and you never interact with him for any reason whatsoever. Oh, and if you think they look ugly, just wait until you hear them talk.
Hi! Thanks for letting me out. Rather good it'll do me.
Alright, so Lonnie Manello directed the game's voice acting. Alright, look, Lonnie. I like you. You're an alright actress, and I mean you no disrespect. But I'm sorry, these actors were not given the greatest direction in the world. But then again, this script is also not amazing, so you probably did the best you could with what you had.
Gee, you're swell. Catch you later.
Cool. Maybe we can fish together and stuff.
Radio.
Oh, Lord, Frogger himself. Okay, so there was an actual attempt at world building in the instruction manual here. None of it really matters, so don't get too concerned about it. But by doing some basic math, Frogger is supposed to be 17 years old at the time of this game. 17. And he still sounds like this.
Thanks a lot, Bees. You're great.
I think every kid has something special inside of them. They just have to discover what it is.
Not to mention, he does this girly-looking ballet pirouette every time he descends from a high fall. Yeah. Sure. Alright, well, I've gone on for a while now, and I've done nothing but bash this game. But there's gotta be something I like about it, right? I mean, for all the problems this game has, when I was 12, I genuinely, unironically enjoyed playing this. Maybe my tolerance for bad games was a lot higher back then. I did also play a lot of crap on Super Nintendo. Well, honestly, the music's pretty nice. It's really fitting for the levels and is genuinely well done. It's nice to know that if one person did their job competently, it was the composer. And despite what I said again and again about the character models, it's not the worst looking early PS2 game I've played. Some of these environments actually look kinda nice. I like how this dark woods stage looks, and how this one underwater segment in it looks. Oh, and the catacombs level looks pretty neat. These ghosts are actually pretty creepy looking.
I know frog foo.
Oh, and apparently in this level where you have to get honey for a cable car operating bear, you can either talk to the bees and ask politely for their honey, or you can attack them, kill them, and take the honey that way. I can't believe the game actually lets you do that. That's actually kind of neat. And, is that really all I got? Shit, I guess so. Alright, so since we're nearing the end, I'm gonna go ahead and touch a little on the game's ending, since it kinda explains on why I think this game might have been rushed. This will discuss some of the ending, so if you don't want that spoiled for you for whatever reason, go ahead and skip to this time in the video. Alright, so anyway, the game, right up until you get to the final boss, does not have a main antagonist. There is no mention whatsoever of a main villain of any kind. Not in the game itself, or even in the instruction manual. You'd think that this mad scientist guy, or this witch in this one cutscene, or even Metal Chicken Ray, would be the final boss fight of the game, right? Well, after this cutscene, you never see this witch again. But no. Instead, you walk into this room in the final level, and you see this MODOK-looking motherfucker, and he's supposed to be the cause of everything going on in the game. The goblin invasion, the castle being half destroyed, all of it.
What up, YouTube?
You literally just meet this guy for the first time, and this is who you fight as the final boss. Oh, by the way, this guy apparently is named the Magical General of Light and Industry. This name makes literally no sense in the context of the rest of the game, aside from being another Star Wars reference. The Magical General of Light and Industry, Industrial Light and Magic. You see what I said about referencing Star Wars as a replacement for being original? Star Wars was a fucking mistake. Anyway, he has the human princess and even the fairy frog mother captured, but she's shown still able to use her magic, so I don't know why she's even captured in the first place. Yeah, I don't know. Don't worry about it. The writers clearly didn't. Like, I can't even say that this boss fight is hard, because with the magic stones that this game just throws at you right beforehand, activating one and just hawking fire loogies at him, even with me messing up my aim here, I had him beat in exactly 30 seconds. And with that, the final cutscene plays, and after the credits roll, you get what I think were cutscenes that were supposed to appear in the game, but I think the levels and story beats surrounding them might have gotten cut from the final game. I'm really not sure. I know that there was at least one level that was cut from the final game, but other than that, my research for any kind of development notes or anything of the sort came up fruitless. There was one developer interview with GameSpot before the game was released, hinting that the PS2 was a bit tricky for the developers to make the game for, but other than that, nothing. There was a whole number of reasons that may explain why this game ended up being such a mess. Konami probably didn't give their American studio enough of a budget, or they hired an inexperienced team to work on a console that hadn't been out for very long and everyone was still figuring out what it was. I mean, without any development team members outright saying what it was, none of it that I could find anyway, I'm left merely assuming. If that GameSpot interview that's linked in the description is any indication, the game was originally supposed to come out in October 2001, which implies that the game was even delayed a month. I have to also assume that Konami wanted the game out in time for the already stacked 2001 holiday season. I don't want this to sound like I'm making excuses for the game, but it would definitely explain why the game ended up the way it did. So if the footage you saw and my commentary in this video wasn't enough to imply it, this game got absolutely ripped to shreds by critics. It currently sits at an abysmal 32 on Metacritic. The outlets that bothered to review it in the first place were not kind to this game in the slightest. And rightfully so, it is not a polished game. It's a buggy mess with barely functioning combat, an uncooperative camera, glitches out the wazoo, and some really bad voice acting. And some of y'all out there are really trying hard to tell me that The Last of Us Part 2 is the worst game ever made. No. Like, not even close. It isn't even that long of a game either. My first playthrough for this video didn't even take me 3 hours, and I wasn't even skipping cutscenes or anything, but I also wasn't particularly bothering to get all the collectibles in the levels either. If you're skipping cutscenes, not trying for any of the collectibles, and are just doing the bare minimum that's required of you to reach the end, it'll likely take you less than 2 hours to get through it. This game definitely felt longer to me as a kid. It's also not a difficult game either. Like, at all. It's so easy a 5-year-old could beat it. There was a Game Boy Advance version released in May the following year, but I hear that version's also not great, even if it was developed by Vicarious Visions. And there was also a PC port in September that included one extra level, but I really don't care. It should also probably come as no surprise that Konami never attempted this style of 3D platformer gameplay for Frogger ever again after this, as not only did the franchise miraculously survive somehow, it went back to the tile-hopping gameplay for the handful of Frogger games that were released after this. So yeah, Frogger the Great Quest is not a good game, as I've alluded to again and again in this video. But oddly enough, I would actually still recommend checking it out. Not in spite of how bad it is, but because of how bad it is. Which is a whole lot more than I can say about one of Konami's other games. I know other content creators say this often about kids media, so I'll try and keep it brief. Just because a game or other piece of media is aimed at kids, doesn't mean that you can half-ass it for a quick buck. Well, I mean, I guess you can, but really you shouldn't. Because sometimes, in this game's case anyway, you end up with a glitch-ridden mess that your kid's probably gonna hate. For me anyway, this game is bad in a way that it loops around to being pretty funny. This is a game that I think is best enjoyed with a group of friends and some drinks, and just ripping the game apart like a really bad low-budget movie. I may not be able to recommend the game for what it wanted to be, but I can absolutely recommend it to people who want to show off just how bad it is to their friends. I see physical copies of this game going for about $5 to $10 on eBay, so I'd start there if you want something that you can entertain your friends with in all the wrong ways. This game seems to be getting a little bit more attention online because of how awful it is, so it's really fun to see people who might be experiencing it for the first time on streams and stuff. And as somebody who played this when it first came out, I look forward to seeing all of your first-time reactions to it. And that about wraps up this video. So I want to thank you all for watching the first Right in the Childhood video since 2020, and my first major video of 2023. I know that these videos take a really long time for me to make, so I want to thank you all for your patience while I cobble these together. If you enjoyed it, or even if you didn't, please let me know in the comments section and leave a rating in according to your feelings towards this video. And do consider checking out and or sharing some of my other videos. Thanks again for watching, and I hope to see you all in the next one.